I've popped on over to the Facilities Show, and I'm right in the corner now, and I'm joined by Mike Brooman, who's the CEO at Vanti. And Mike, we're in the Smart Buildings Immersive Experience, a really impressive zone that you've put together here. Just tell us what it's all about.
Well, thank you and welcome. So the Immersive Zone is about us bringing together all the different vendors that are at the show into one place, integrating all their technologies together so we can actually show some people a live smart building at the Excel.
And this is where Vanti, your company, comes into it. It's this integration piece. Just tell us a bit more about how you do that and what people get out the other end of that.
Sure. So Vanti works through the full building or fit out life cycle. So we'll typically start with design teams, looking at all of the different functions and features that people want to get out of a building or a space. So we're huge advocates for beginning with the end in mind. Yep. We'll work with the design team, do all the coordination through that process, and then typically innovate across into main contractor or fit out contractor land. We'll actually work with those teams, do the install, and then typically we'll come back client side or into the building operator to actually look after the facility on an ongoing basis. So we work very closely with FMs to really run their facilities and look after all the technology within it.
Yep. Now, just over our shoulders here, we're seeing a very impressive, I want to say dashboard, but this would be like the biggest vehicle in the world here. Kind of a control center display here. Yep. And this is bringing together all of these different bits of data that you would get in a smart building and presenting them in a really neat kind of way that hopefully, I guess, would enable people to make things.
That's the idea. So I think it's also about control as well as the data. So we can actually get into all of those systems to turn lights on and off, affect the temperature, all those kind of bits and pieces. So think of us like the universal remote control that you used to use for your VHS and TV back in the day. Yep. But it's really about moving beyond this concept of data being the new oil within buildings. It really isn't. It's about utility and how we make great people experiences within spaces.
You mentioned data is the new oil there, whatever, but you know, oil is kind of useless on its own. You've got to refine it. You've got to do something with that oil in order to turn it into some value, to turn it into something.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think there's a lot of people out there talking about single panes of glass and dashboards. Yeah. Widgets, pie charts, bar graphs are great, but unless you've got insight to actually do things with it, it's useless. Yeah. And there's also lots of talk in the industry at the moment about machine learning and AI. We're very far away from being able to deliver kind of Skynet and self-optimizing buildings because we haven't got the integration piece right yet. Yeah. So getting the networks in buildings correct, getting all the systems aligned, making sure the data's in the right format, that's the first step. And then we can move into those later layers. So really this is about empowering FMs, giving teams insight and accessible data, because a lot of things at the moment are captured in silos within individual systems. It's very difficult for people to keep moving between all those systems on a daily basis to get the small bits of information often that they need, which is critical alarms, something's not quite performing correctly, and being able to respond to those so that ultimately people in the space sit in the Goldilocks zone of everything being just right, not too hot, not too cold, not too bright, not too dark, and they can get on with their day.
What are the main questions that you've had from visitors to the zone here? What are people most curious to learn about?
Yeah, so well, we've been doing this for a number of years now, and I think when we originally started, it was very much about what is a smart building. People just didn't understand what that was, and they certainly didn't understand the concept of a digital workspace. Yeah. I think the interesting thing now is that we're moving much more to a position of people's understanding has really lifted. It's now really about how do we get one, and I think post-pandemic, the best description I've heard of spaces in the new office needs to be a combination between a bar and a library. So you need that kind of social element, that kind of collaboration space, people able to come together, really work together on problems. Yeah. But then you also need those kind of like more quieter environments to take private phone calls or interact with people on hybrid meetings. And I think Leesman did some phenomenal research through the pandemic, which showed that the average office space was actually much poorer as a work environment to most people's average home setup. And so really the challenge now for building owners, operators, and people that run those spaces is how do they create that outstanding experience that gives people a reason to come into those spaces and work together.
And I think you're right. And certainly the time when we're in right now, 3 years since the beginning of the pandemic, 2 years, 18 months since people have really been returning to the office in earnest. there's a period of immense self-reflection from companies, from building owners, managers, as well as from individuals about what the workplace of the future looks like. So to be able to offer that smart integration, to be able to use these spaces more efficiently, more effectively, more sustainably as well, let's face it, it's the right conversation at the right time, I think.
Well, and I think you've touched on a really important point there. ESG is now the kind of elephant in the room. We've got 10% of our commercial building stock already not meeting the targets that the government has outlined. The race is on towards 2030. And I think if people are just focused on the E of ESG and just the energy part of the environmental, it's such a small slither of what we actually need to achieve. And actually it's about how do we create really high performing spaces that deliver great experience for people first and foremost, but are also, super sustainable and can deliver on the other social and governance goals of ESG as well, which is a lot of how do you get this kind of stuff out and make it accessible to the right teams of people that need to be able to talk to folks within their organisation about those bits and pieces.
Okay, so before we go, just a quick question for you. If you've got somebody from the event here today coming to you saying, look, my building, we could really do with it being a bit smarter. Where do I start? What's the direction that you point them towards? Apart from chatting with you, but practically, what do they need to come to the table with in order to have a constructive, productive conversation?
So I think it really depends where they're at. So if you've just refurbished an office and you're looking to get more out of it, there's a number of IoT solutions that you can kind of layer over the top of what you've got.
Yep.
Often wireless technologies, gets data out very quickly, very easy to deploy. Unfortunately, battery based, so you need to be carrying around a battery pack every 2-3 years. But it's really looking for those moments of change. So big refurbishments, opportunities to move, they're the times to really think about it, because it's not, it can never just be about technology. It has to always be a very joined up thing with, we often want the holy trinity of FM, HR and IT involved in conversations, because really, if you can get all those three to the table, you can produce something really special.
Digital transformation for buildings,
Exactly.
but my problem with that term digital transformation is that often leads people to thinking that it's a technology transformation. It's not. It's a business transformation.
Absolutely.
With technology, with digital at its heart. But it needs, I completely agree, HR, all the rest of these parts in order to make that transformation successful. And you're saying it's the same from a buildings perspective 100%. As well. Wow. Really good to chat to you. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for putting together this amazing experience over here. And I wish you all the very best for the next few days here.
Thanks so much.
Cheers.